My name is Diane. And for 18 years, I became very good at pretending. I was good at smiling when I wanted to cry. I was good at saying, I'm fine, when I wasn't. I was good at making everyone else comfortable while quietly falling apart inside. But nobody knew that better than the woman in my bathroom mirror. Every morning, before anyone else woke up, I would stand there. Sometimes for 5 minutes. Sometimes for 10. I'd look at myself and practice. A smile. A deeper smile. A smile that looked natural. Then I'd whisper. Today is going to be a good day. Even when I knew it wasn't. My husband, Douglas, and I had been married for 18 years. When we first met, I believed I had found the person I would grow old with. Douglas was charming. Funny. Confident. He knew how to make people feel important. And when we were young, I loved the way he looked at me. Or at least, I thought I did. We had 2 children. Our son Marcus was 16 when things between us began falling apart. Our daughter Alicia was 14. They were wonderful children. Smart. Kind. Funny. And they were the reason I stayed. That was what I told myself. I'm staying for the children. Whenever Douglas and I had an argument, I told myself that. Whenever he slept in the guest room, I told myself that. Whenever we sat at the dinner table and barely spoke, I told myself that. Whenever I cried quietly in the bathroom, I told myself that. I was staying for my children. At least, that's what I believe. The strange thing about a marriage ending isn't always one dramatic event. Sometimes it happens quietly. A little at a time. One conversation disappears. Then another. One kiss becomes less frequent. Then eventually there are no kisses at all. One night, you realize you've been sleeping on opposite sides of the house for months. And then one day you look at the person you married and realize you don't know them anymore. That's what happened to Douglas and me. There wasn't one terrible betrayal. There wasn't one explosive affair that everyone could point to. There was simply distance. And silence. We became roommates. We paid bills together. Raised children together. Attended family events together. But we stopped being husband and wife. The first time I realized how bad things had become was during our 15th wedding anniversary. I had prepared dinner. I bought candles. I wore the black dress Douglas used to love. I cooked his favorite meal. I even bought a bottle of wine. I waited until 9 o'clock. Then 10 o'clock. Then 11 o'clock. At 11:37, I heard the front door open. Douglas walked inside. He looked exhausted. Hey, he said. Hey. He looked at the dining table. You did all this? I nodded. I thought we could celebrate. He stared at me for a moment. Then he sighed. Diane, I'm tired. I know. I don't feel like celebrating. Something inside me cracked. I forced a smile. That's okay. He walked upstairs. I sat at that table alone. The candles burned down. The food became cold. And at midnight, I blew out the candles myself. That night, I cried harder than I had cried in years. But the next morning, I woke up. I looked in the mirror. And I practiced my smile. I thought I was hiding everything. I wasn't. One afternoon, I was washing dishes when Marcus walked into the kitchen. He was 16. He stood there quietly. Mom? Yes? Are you happy? I nearly dropped the plate in my hand. What kind of question is that? He shrugged. I don't know. Of course I'm happy. He looked at me. That teenage look. The one that tells you they know you're lying. Mom. What? You don't have to lie to me. I turned back toward the sink. I'm not lying. He didn't argue. He simply walked away. That night, I cried again. Not because Marcus had asked the question. But because I realized my children had been watching me. Alicia noticed too. She was more sensitive than Marcus. She rarely asked direct questions. Instead, she would hug me. Longer than necessary. Sometimes she'd sit beside me while I cooked. Sometimes she'd come into my room and say, Mom, can I sleep here tonight? I always said yes. And we would lie in bed together. I would listen to her breathe. And silently promise her that I was doing the right thing. Even if I wasn't sure anymore, there was another reason I stayed. Something very few people knew about. My father. His name was Daniel. He died shortly before Alicia was born. My father had never liked Douglas. Not because Douglas was a bad man, but because my father believed Douglas didn't understand what it meant to love someone. One evening, shortly before our wedding, my father asked Douglas to meet him privately. I remember asking Douglas what they talked about. He smiled. Just man-to-man stuff. I laughed. Should I be worried? No. I believed him. Years later, I would remember that conversation. And I would realize there was something my father and Douglas had discussed that night. Something that would remain hidden from me for 18 years. Then came Alicia's wedding. The day I'd dreamed about since she was a little girl. The backyard was transformed. White flowers. Golden lights. Elegant tables. Soft music. Family members everywhere. Alicia looked beautiful. She wore a simple but elegant wedding dress. When I saw her walking toward me before the ceremony, I almost cried. My baby. She smiled. Mom. I hugged her. Then she whispered. Are you okay? I laughed. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because you're Mom. She smiled. And Mom is always pretending everything is okay. I looked at her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something that stayed with me. Whatever happens after today, I want you to know something. What? You've done enough. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. Later, I would. The reception was beautiful. There was music. Laughter. Champagne. People dancing beneath the string lights. Marcus was joking with his cousins. Alicia danced with her new husband. And for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. I looked at my children. They were grown. They didn't need me to hold the family together anymore. Maybe, I thought. Maybe my job was finally done. I sat at our table with a glass of champagne. Douglas was standing nearby. He had taken off his suit jacket. He placed it over the back of a chair. I noticed a wrinkle in the sleeve. Without thinking, I reached for it. I had spent 18 years taking care of that man. Straightening his collars. Fixing his ties. Folding his clothes. It was automatic. I picked up the jacket. And then, something slipped from the inside pocket. A folded piece of paper. It landed near my shoes. I bent down. Picked it up. There was writing on the front. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I turned the paper over. And saw one word. Douglas. My heart began beating faster. I almost put it back. I really did. I told myself it was private. I told myself it wasn't my business. But something inside me wouldn't let go. I opened it. The first sentence read. Douglas, if you're reading this, 18 years have already passed. I froze. 18 years. Why 18? I kept reading. I know you promised her that you would never tell her the truth. My hands began shaking. The truth? What truth? I looked around. Everyone was celebrating. Nobody noticed me. I continued. Diane deserves to know why you married her. My heart stopped. Why I married her? I was Diane. The woman he married. The woman who had spent 18 years beside him. Why had he married me? I read the next line. You didn't marry Diane because you loved her. I couldn't breathe. I'd suspected it. But reading it in someone else's handwriting was different. It made it real. Then came the sentence that destroyed everything. You married her because you owed her father a debt. I stared at the paper. My father. What did my father have to do with my marriage? Diane? I looked up. Douglas was standing in front of me. His face had changed. He knew. He saw the letter. Diane, give me that. I stepped back. What is this? Please. Who wrote this? He said nothing. Douglas. People were beginning to look over. He lowered his voice. Not here. I laughed bitterly. Not here? Diane. 18 years, Douglas. He looked away. 18 years of what? He whispered. I'm sorry. I felt my eyes fill with tears. Don't apologize. What? Tell me the truth. He couldn't. Not there. Not in front of our children. Not on their wedding day. So I folded the letter. Put it in my purse. And walked away. Later that night, after the last guest left, Douglas came into our bedroom. I was sitting on the edge of the bed. The letter was on the table. Sit down, I said. He sat. Tell me everything. He took a deep breath. Then he began. 18 years ago, I was going to leave. I closed my eyes. Leave me? Yes. For someone else? He nodded. I already knew the answer. There was a woman, he said. Rachel? His eyes widened. You knew? I knew enough. He looked down. I loved her. I swallowed. But my father found out. Douglas nodded. Your father asked me to stay. Why? Because you were pregnant. I stared at him. With Alicia. Yes. What did he say? Douglas looked toward the floor. He told me you deserved a chance to raise your children with their father. And that was it? No. What else? Douglas hesitated. He made me promise. What promise? That I would never abandon you. I laughed. But you didn't love me. No. Then why marry me? He looked at me. Because your father believed a family was worth sacrificing for. I stared at him. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for 18 years. Did he ask you to pretend? Douglas's eyes filled with tears. Yes. I thought that was the whole story. It wasn't. Douglas told me my father had been dying. He knew he wouldn't live long enough to see Alicia grow up. He was afraid I would be left alone. Afraid my children would grow up without their father. So he made Douglas promise. Stay. Protect them. Don't leave. And Douglas did. But there was one thing neither of them expected. 18 years was a long time. Too long to live a lie. Douglas didn't leave. But he didn't learn how to love me either. Instead, we built a family around a secret. And I spent 18 years believing I was failing at marriage. When the truth was, the marriage had never been what I thought it was. The next morning, Alicia came into my room. She closed the door. Mom. Did you know? She looked down. Not everything. How long? She began crying. Since I was 16. My heart sank. You knew? Dad told me. And Marcus? He knows. I stood. Both of my children knew? We didn't know how to tell you. You could have told me the truth. We were scared. Scared of what? Of losing our family. I looked at her. Your family was already broken. She cried harder. I felt terrible for saying it. But it was true. We thought you were choosing us, she whispered. I shook my head. I thought I was choosing you. She walked toward me. Mom. I gave 18 years. I know. I gave up everything. I know. And now I'm finding out that everyone thought I was sacrificing myself. She hugged me. Mom, we never wanted that. I held my daughter. And for the first time I understood something. My children hadn't asked me to stay. I had chosen to stay. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I left. Alicia reached into her bag. She pulled out another envelope. This was for you. I stared at it. From who? Grandpa. My hands went cold. My father. Dead for nearly 18 years. And somehow, he still had something to say to me. I opened the letter. His handwriting immediately brought tears to my eyes. My beautiful Diane. If you are reading this, then you have finally learned the truth. I stopped. My vision blurred. I continued. I need you to understand something. I made the decision I believed would protect you. But protection and control can sometimes look exactly the same. I sat down. The next sentence broke me. I asked Douglas to stay because I was afraid of what would happen if he left. I thought keeping your family together would save you from pain. Then. But I cannot promise that I made the right choice. I cried. My father continued. If there comes a day when my daughter realizes she has spent too much of her life trying to make everyone else happy, I want her to remember this. I read the final words. You were never born to be someone's sacrifice. That night, I sat across from Douglas. I think we should separate. He nodded. I understand. I don't hate you. I know. But I can't stay. I know. Do you regret marrying me? He took a long time to answer. No. That surprised me. Why? Because Marcus and Alicia came into my life. He looked at me. And because somewhere along the way, you became my family. I looked away. Family isn't the same as love. I know. He stood. I'm sorry I couldn't give you what you deserved. I looked at him. And I'm sorry I spent so long pretending I didn't need it. We both cried. Then he walked out. The first few weeks alone were difficult. Very difficult. I would wake up and instinctively reach for the other side of the bed. Then I'd remember. I was alone. Sometimes I felt guilty. Sometimes I felt free. Sometimes I felt both. I started taking walks. I joined a small book club. I visited old friends. I started painting. I learned things about myself I'd forgotten. I realized I liked quiet mornings. I liked jazz. I liked gardening. I liked sitting on my balcony with coffee and watching the city wake up. For 18 years, I had been Douglas's wife. Then I was Marcus and Alicia's mother. But who was Diane? I was finally finding out. The year after Alicia's wedding, I returned to the same backyard. The string lights were still there. Some of the flowers had grown wild. I stood beneath the tree where my daughter had danced with her husband. I thought about the letter. The secret. The marriage. The 18 years. Then I heard footsteps. Alicia walked toward me. Mom. I smiled. A real smile. Hi, sweetheart. She looked at me. You look happy. I am. She smiled. Really? I nodded. Really? She hugged me. Then she asked. Do you regret staying? I thought for a moment. No. She looked surprised. I don't regret you. She smiled. But would you do it again? I shook my head. No. She laughed softly. Why? Because I know now that loving your children doesn't mean destroying yourself. She nodded. I learned that from you. I smiled. Then at least something good came from it. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. From Douglas. I almost didn't open it. But I did. There were only a few paragraphs. He told me he had moved to another state. He told me he had started therapy. He told me he was finally learning how to live honestly. Then he wrote. Diane, I'm sorry that the truth came out the way it did. I'm sorry that I allowed you to believe you weren't loved when the truth was more complicated. Then. You deserved a husband who chose you freely. I stopped reading. There was one final sentence. I hope someday you forgive yourself for the years you spent trying to save everyone. I put the letter down. And I cried. Not because I wanted him back. But because I realized I had been waiting for someone to give me permission to forgive myself. I didn't need permission. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Just like I had for 18 years. I walked into the bathroom. Stood in front of the mirror. And looked at myself. For years, I had practiced smiling. But that morning, I didn't. I simply looked at myself. Gray hair. Wrinkles. Tired eyes. A face that had lived. A face that had survived. I touched the mirror. And whispered. You did enough. Then I smiled. Not because I was pretending. Because I believed it. People often think sacrifice is the greatest proof of love. Sometimes it is. But sometimes sacrifice becomes something else. Sometimes we sacrifice because we're afraid. Afraid of leaving. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of starting over. Afraid that choosing ourselves means we're selfish. I spent 18 years believing that staying made me a good mother. But my children never needed a mother who was broken behind closed doors. They needed a mother who was honest. They needed to see that love shouldn't require you to disappear. And perhaps the biggest lesson I learned was this. You can love your family without losing yourself. You can forgive someone without taking them back. You can appreciate the years you lived without wishing to live them again. And you can start over at any age. Because sometimes the ending of one life is actually the beginning of another. If you've stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. I hope Diane's story touched your heart in some way. Maybe you've sacrificed something for someone you love. Maybe you've stayed in a situation because you thought other people needed you. Or maybe you're simply waiting for the courage to choose yourself. Whatever your story is, remember this. You matter too. And sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the beginning of healing. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to Good News Stories for more emotional stories about family, love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and second chances. And I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were Diane and discovered that your entire 18-year marriage had been built around a promise your husband made to your father? Would you forgive Douglas? Would you leave? Or would you try to rebuild the marriage? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to share this story with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for watching Good News Stories. Until our next story. Remember, you can love others deeply without forgetting to love yourself. Red Heart.